Today we're diving deep into the whole promise of bringing manufacturing back to America. And let me tell you, it's not as straightforward as it sounds. It's like trying to rebuild an entire engine piece by piece without all the parts aligning perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Because on the surface, it seems simple. Impose tariffs, get companies to reshore, and boom, manufacturing revives. But the reality is a whole lot more tangled, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like a three-pronged symphony that has to be in perfect harmony. First off, you need the private sector to commit massive amounts of capital, we're talking trillions, to build new factories, shipyards, and the entire supporting
Got it.
infrastructure.
And that's not just a matter of writing a check, is it? Investors need confidence, but they're clearly hesitant right now due to all the uncertainty in policy and global economics.
Right? And that brings us to the next part, labor. To have a true manufacturing renaissance, you either need American workers ready to take on lower wage construction jobs or a reversal of the current immigration policies that are basically throttling the available workforce.
Right, exactly. But isn't expecting American workers to accept those lower wages a bit unrealistic? I mean, with the cost of living as it is, that doesn't sound like a very appealing option for many.
Absolutely. It's a huge challenge. It's like asking someone to rebuild their home with cheaper materials when the original structure was made with premium bricks. And on top of that, there's the ever-present threat of runaway inflation if all these sectors ramp
Yeah.
up at once.
So essentially, for a manufacturing revival, we're looking at a delicate balance, huge capital investment, a willing workforce, and the big one, controlling inflation, all happening at the same time and on a national scale.
Precisely. And then there's the notion that if tariffs are imposed, companies will simply pivot and move production back home. But as Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick pointed out, CEOs are like freezing their decision making because they're not sure how long this transition will take.
Yeah, Lutnick's comment about interest rates potentially dropping and making America stronger sounds optimistic until you realize there's no clear timetable. It's like waiting for a balance to magically settle without knowing how long you have to hang in there.
Exactly. And that uncertainty is the fatal flaw here. The administration's blueprint, with its simple linear progression, tariffs lead to reshoring, which leads to good jobs, completely ignores the messy reality
it's a real
of these
stretch.
intertwined variables.
And then there's the added layer of logistics. If manufacturing is to come roaring back, it's not just about building factories. You also need to build a fleet capable of transporting all that output. And data shows one Chinese shipyard outproduced every American shipyard combined since World War II. That's mind-blowing.
Absolutely. It underscores the magnitude of the task. It's one thing to call for a manufacturing revival, but it's another entirely to rebuild an entire logistics network from the ground up. It's like trying to rebuild an airplane while it's still in mid-flight.
Spot on. So, in a way, the promise hinges on this perfect storm of investment, labor, and controlled inflation. But if one of these elements fails to materialize, the whole strategy could collapse.
Exactly. And this is where the discussion gets even more interesting. Even though we've seen early wins with companies like Apple and Hyundai shifting some operations, those isolated successes haven't convinced the broader market to commit to a massive surge in manufacturing investment.
Right, absolutely. And I have to raise a point here. Some might argue that if tariffs do eventually create that balance, wouldn't that encourage more business investment? Isn't there a feedback loop that could eventually tip things in favor of reshoring?
That's a fair challenge, but the counter is that without a clearly defined roadmap and timeline, the risk of heavy sustained investment remains too great. Investors crave certainty, and when every variable is up in the air, large-scale capital commitment becomes
True.
nearly impossible.
So the administration's strategy might be relying on magical thinking, expecting trillions to flow in without having assured the conditions needed for that influx.
Exactly. It's like trying to build a massive puzzle without knowing if you even have all the pieces in place. And that's precisely what leaves so much money on the table. Investors are just sitting tight because the conditions aren't ripe for transformative change.
Right. Then we also have the critical historical perspective. The decline in the Rust Belt wasn't just sparked by modern free trade, it's decades in the making. So, yeah, it isn't just a matter of reversing recent policies.
Absolutely. And that historical context is essential. You can't simply hit a reset button on American manufacturing when the decline has roots going back generations. The system and the economic culture have changed massively, and rebuilding now requires an entirely new layered approach.
Exactly. And while the political buzz paints a picture of instant revival, the reality involves a complex reordering of the economic landscape. A reordering that calls for private funds to step in and fill a void that only they can fill.
Precisely, and without that confident, coordinated action from the private sector, we're looking at trillions of dollars potentially just waiting on the sidelines. It's a scenario of radical uncertainty, like a game where the rules keep changing
Yeah,
as
that's
you
a
play.
good point. And what about those early manufacturing moves that seem promising? We've seen a few notable companies make headlines, but do you really think those isolated cases can overcome the systemic inertia?
Not really. They're more like spots of hope in an otherwise murky landscape. Those wins are outliers. They don't necessarily indicate that the entire sector is ready to leap back into full-scale manufacturing on American soil.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, there's an irony in the current state. We are witnessing plant closures and layoffs alongside these lofty promises, which really sends mixed signals to the rest of the market.
Absolutely. It's almost like trying to rebuild a house while tearing down parts of it at the same time. The disconnect between the high-level goals and everyday economic realities is stark.
And aside from the economic factors, there's also the looming question of whether the tariffs and other trade policies will hold up over time. That uncertainty just compounds the whole situation.
Right. This is where policy consistency becomes crucial. If tariffs, which are supposed to be a catalyst for reshoring, might not even stick, then you end up in a loop of hesitancy where every participant in the economy is waiting for clarity.
Yeah, exactly. And the shipping sector, oh man, rebuilding a fleet to transport thousands of tons of manufactured goods is no small feat. Especially when, like you mentioned, the US has fallen so far behind, it's almost like trying to catch lightning in a bottle.
Right? And that brings us full circle. A true manufacturing renaissance would require not just reestablishing factories, but overhauling the entire ecosystem, from labor and materials to logistics and international policies.
That's the crux of it. So, to sum it up in a way, while the idea of bringing manufacturing back to America sounds inspiring on paper, the execution would demand an almost magical alignment of various interdependent factors.
Exactly. And until that kind of comprehensive reordering happens, you've got billions, even trillions of dollars in potential investment just waiting on hold. It's a blueprint that's grand in ambition, but frankly, disconnected from the gritty details of economic reality.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess the key takeaway here is that real economic change isn't about a single sweeping policy. It's about, aligning a myriad of moving parts. And that takes time, effort, and a firm plan.
Spot on. It's like trying to rebuild a landmark with a single tool. You need an entire toolkit that works in concert. And until that comprehensive approach is laid out, we're stuck in this state of radical uncertainty.
Exactly. This certainly challenges the narrative of quick fixes. Instead, it forces us to confront the deep-seated issues that have been building up over decades.
Absolutely. No magical turnaround is going to fix a system where the fundamentals, capital, labor, infrastructure, just aren't all in sync. It's an intricate dance that requires precise timing and,
Yeah, right.
trust in the process.
And until that choreography happens, we're looking at a prolonged period where investments remain uncertain and the public might continue facing a rough economic patch.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale. Bold promises without the detailed, realistic groundwork lead to more hesitation than hope. And that, in turn, stalls the very progress they're trying to spark.
Absolutely. So, setting aside the idealism, the real path forward would involve a measured, multifaceted restructuring of the economy. Something that, frankly, might take much longer than the political timeline suggests.
Precisely. And until those conditions are met, until the private sector is fully on board, the workforce is ready, and inflation is kept in check, the notion of a manufacturing renaissance will remain, well, more of a distant dream than an impending reality.
Yeah. In other words, it's an ambitious vision that demands a level of coordination and commitment, which, at least for now, seems just out of reach.
Exactly. It's a reminder that economic transformation is never just about policy declarations. It's about the nitty-gritty details played out over the long haul, and until all those pieces fit together, big promises stay just that, promises.
Indeed. Well, that was a pretty engaging breakdown. It really shows how simple slogans can hide a labyrinth of challenges.
Absolutely, and it just makes you think sometimes the grand narratives need a serious reality check when it comes to actual implementation. Till next time, keep questioning those big promises and looking at the hard facts behind them.
Yeah, for sure.